Picture this, if you will. It's the year 1066, and you find yourself accused of a heinous crime you didn't commit. Your reputation, your freedom, and your very life hang in the balance. But fear not, for in this medieval world, you have one last chance to prove your innocence by engaging in mortal combat with your accuser. Now, I know what you're thinking. Surely, this can't be real. Oh, but it was, my friends. It was as real as the cold steel of a knight's blade, as real as the fear that gripped the hearts of those who faced such trials. Trial by combat, also known as judicial duel or wager of battle, was a method of Germanic law used to settle accusations in the absence of witnesses or a confession. It was based on the belief that God would grant victory to the righteous party. And let me tell you, it was anything but a fair fight. Imagine the tension in the air as two combatants prepare to face each other in a fight to the death. The crowd gathers, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and morbid curiosity. The smell of sweat and fear mingles with the metallic scent of freshly polished armor. The atmosphere is electric, charged with the knowledge that only one person will walk away from this encounter. But wait, there's more? This wasn't just some barbaric free-for-all. Oh no, trial by combat had rules, my friends. Rules that would make your blood run cold. First, the accuser had to swear an oath that their accusation was true. Then, the accused would swear their innocence. And here's where it gets really interesting. If you were caught lying in your oath, you could have your hand cut off. Talk about high stakes. Now you might be wondering, what if I'm not exactly a seasoned warrior? Do I still have to fight? Well, fear not, for the medieval justice system had a solution for that too. If you were a woman, a child, or a man over 60 years old, you could hire a champion to fight in your place. But let me tell you, finding a good champion wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't cheap. Let's delve deeper into this brutal practice, shall we? The roots of trial by combat can be traced back to ancient Germanic law, but it really came into its own during the Middle Ages. In fact, it was so widely accepted that it was even used to settle land disputes between monasteries. Can you imagine? Holy men, servants of God, resorting to violence to settle their differences. It's enough to make your head spin. Now let me paint you a picture of what one of these trials might have looked like. The year is 1386, and we find ourselves in Paris, France. Two men stand before the king, ready to engage in what would become one of the most famous trials by combat in history. On one side, we have Jacques Legris, a Norman knight accused of raping Marguerite de Carouge, the wife of another knight, Jean de Carouge. On the other side, we have Jean himself, ready to defend his wife's honor and prove Legris' guilt. The tension is palpable as the two men mount their horses, lances at the ready. The crowd holds its breath as the signal is given, and the knights charge at each other with all the force they can muster. The sound of lances shattering against shields echoes across the field, followed by the clash of steel as the men dismount and draw their swords. For hours they fight, their armor growing heavy with sweat and blood. The crowd watches in horrified fascination as these two men, once friends, now fight to the death. Finally, with a mighty blow, Jean de Carouge brings Jacques Legris to his knees. As he raises his sword for the final strike, Legris cries out, swearing his innocence one last time. But it's too late. The sword falls, and justice, as it was understood in those times, is served. This, my friends, was the reality of trial by combat, a brutal, bloody affair that often left more questions than answers. But it wasn't just about proving innocence or guilt. Oh no, it was about so much more than that. You see, trial by combat was deeply rooted in the medieval concept of chivalry and honor. It was believed that God would not allow an innocent person to be defeated, and so the outcome of the battle was seen as divine judgment. Can you imagine the pressure? Not only are you fighting for your life, but you're also fighting to prove that God is on your side. But here's where it gets really interesting. Trial by combat wasn't just for the nobility. Oh no, commoners could participate too. In fact, there are records of trials by combat between peasants that were fought with clubs and shields rather than swords and lances. Talk about a level playing field. Now you might be thinking, surely this practice didn't last long. Surely people realized how barbaric and unreliable it was. Well, my friends, you'd be surprised. Trial by combat persisted in various forms well into the modern era. In fact, the last recorded judicial duel in France took place in 1547, and in England, it wasn't officially abolished until 1819. Can you believe it? People were still demanding trial by combat well into the age of steam engines and top hats. But wait, there's more. Even after it was officially abolished, the idea of trial by combat continued to capture the imagination of the public. In 2002, a British man named Leon Humphreys demanded the right to trial by combat to settle a $25 fine for a minor motoring offense. Sadly for Mr. Humphreys, his request was denied. I guess the court clerk didn't fancy a duel that day. Now let's take a moment to consider the psychological impact of such a practice. Imagine knowing that your fate rests not on evidence or testimony, but on your ability to defeat another person in combat. The stress, the fear, the sheer terror of facing death for a crime you may or may not have committed. It's almost unimaginable to us today. And what about the spectators? What kind of society turns justice into a blood sport? The answer, my friends, lies in the very fabric of medieval society. In a world where life was often brutal and short, where the line between life and death was razor thin, trial by combat was just another manifestation of the harsh realities of daily life. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. Oh no, there were some truly bizarre and almost comical aspects to trial by combat as well. For instance, in medieval Germany, there was a form of trial by combat known as the Gerichtskampf, or judicial duel, where the combatants fought in a pit, armed with clubs and shields. The twist? They had to fight while standing in barrels sunk into the ground up to their waists. Can you picture it? Two grown men flailing at each other with clubs while stuck in barrels like some sort of deadly whack-a-mole game. And let's not forget the animals. Yes, you heard that right. In some cases, animals were involved in trials by combat. In medieval France, there are records of a trial where a dog was used as a champion to prove its master's innocence in a murder case. The dog won, by the way. I guess you could say justice really went to the dogs that day. But jokes aside, the practice of trial by combat raises some serious questions about the nature of justice and the role of violence in society. It's easy for us to look back and shake our heads at the barbarity of it all, but are we really so different today? Think about it. We may not settle our disputes with swords anymore, but we still have a fascination with violence and combat. From boxing matches to action movies, from video games to mixed martial arts, we still find ways to channel that primal urge for physical confrontation. And what about our justice system? While we may pride ourselves on our advanced legal procedures and presumption of innocence, can we truly say that justice is always served? How many innocent people have been convicted based on circumstantial evidence or false testimony? In some ways, is our system really any more reliable than trial by combat? These are heavy questions, my friends, and I don't pretend to have the answers. But that's the beauty of history, isn't it? It allows us to look back and examine our past, to see how far we've come, and perhaps to see how far we still have to go. As we draw our journey through the bloody annals of trial by combat to a close, I want you to take a moment to really let it all sink in. Feel the weight of the sword in your hand. Hear the roar of the crowd. Taste the fear in your mouth as you face your accuser across the field of battle. This was reality for our ancestors. This was justice. This was life and death, hanging in the balance of a single combat. It's a stark reminder of how far we've come, and perhaps a warning of how easily we could slip back into such barbaric practices if we're not vigilant. So the next time you find yourself complaining about jury duty or grumbling about a traffic ticket, just remember, it could be worse. You could be strapping on armor and preparing to fight for your life in front of a bloodthirsty crowd. And on that cheerful note, I bid you farewell, dear listeners. Until next time, keep your swords sharp and your wits sharper. You never know when you might need to prove your innocence in the arena of combat.